Hi, everybody. Welcome to episode 24 of Duke's Download. And I am so excited to have someone who I really admire, not only a Pennsylvania state representative, but one of the leading LGBTQ voices in America, Brian Sims, as our guest today. He should be on soon, but I just want to thank you all for supporting me so far. I can't believe we're 24 episodes in. And next week, I'm not going to announce them yet, but we also have some really exciting guests joining us. I see Brian is on, so let me, he sent me a it's connecting. So excited for this. Hey there.
Hello, hello.
It's so good to see you. Oh, he left. Okay, it disconnected. Hold on, let me send him another request. Try this again. Hey.
Hi. Forgive me, I can't tell if it's on your end or mine. It's probably on my end. I'm kind of kryptonite for technology.
No, it's perfect. Thank you so much. I'm so excited to talk to you.
I'm happy to join you.
I was thinking about the first time we met and the last time I think I saw you in person was it the .429 conference about 7 years ago now. I think maybe I've seen you since, like once or twice in person.
Yeah, I was thinking about this earlier today as well, sort of when we met, where we met, but I don't think I realized it's been that long since at least we did anything sort of formal together.
Yeah, that was a great weekend. I mean, I got to meet you. I got to meet David Mixner, who's another one of my heroes. But seriously, I'm such a fan of yours. And I'm sorry, by the way, I didn't realize that the debate's starting in less than an hour. So I'll make it succinct. But
yeah, no,
brief.
it's all good. We've got plenty of time to catch up and to talk a little bit about maybe what to expect over the next hour of this debate.
I know. But first of all, how is everything? I mean, what has your life been like during this whole situation?
What a loaded question, right?
Say that again?
I said, what a loaded question, right?
Okay.
Where do I even begin? I sort of like most people, it's been very unusual in some regards, both bad and good. What I'll tell you, at least work-wise, is that the Pennsylvania General Assembly is the legislature that has met the most during the COVID-19 crisis. And a particular committee that I serve on, the state government committee, has actually met the most in our legislature. And so, among the many things that have been going on the last few months is that I've been at work throughout all of this.
Is it virtual or in person?
No, it's been in person for me. For the first time in 250 some odd years, the Pennsylvania General Assembly allowed proxy voting, meaning that a lot of my colleagues didn't have to be there in person to vote, but we couldn't debate via proxy. And there are only so many of us within the caucus that are single, that don't have children, that don't have families, that live alone. And so it was less of a risk for me to be able to be on the floor debating than it was for a lot of my colleagues. As a lot of people saw, at some point, one of my...
I was going to ask you about this. So
yeah,
for those watching who don't know, maybe you can tell the horrifying story of what happened, if you don't mind.
I don't mind. My Republican colleagues at some point, I guess now it was in May, we learned that at least one of my colleagues at the time, we subsequently learned that it was most likely about 4 or 5, tested positive for COVID-19 and was quarantining and had let the Republican leadership know. The Republican leadership had notified a couple other members, but had not notified anybody any of us that served in committees with this guy. And he served on this committee with me. And it was a week-long period that we served alongside him. And they knew this right before Memorial Day and let us all go home for the Memorial Day holiday halfway through the incubation period. We didn't find out because they finally told us. We found out because of a reporter. And I was there on the floor. We had spent months with this same Republican leadership trying to destabilize the governor's emergency order, calling COVID a hoax, telling us that schools needed to be open, that everything was safe, including one of these members himself, whose own bill to get rid of the emergency order ran while he was quarantining secretly. And so we learned from this reporter, and all day long, I sat there with my colleagues on the floor while they tried to kind of go about business as usual, trying to run bills. And every time they did, we'd stand up there and say, no, we need to know if we've been exposed, who's been exposed. We need to let our families know. And we got nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, I walked back to my office, and I was supposed to do an update on our budget. And I flicked the camera on, and I don't usually curse out Facebook, but I lost my cool. I was so, I've grown very accustomed to what a gerrymandered Republican leadership can look like. I have grown very accustomed to very Trumpian style politics in my own legislature. I have been the only openly gay person in my legislature for 6 of the 8 years I've served. And so I generally have a good idea of what the bad behavior I'm going to see is, but I never expected anything like this. And I called for the speaker to resign. Several hours later, and then again the next day, I took to the House floor and did the same thing. I explained to them the incubation period, the exposure that we'd all been put under, the exposure that the security detail and our staff and our family, and for me, part of the reason I was so angry is that I had done something medically, or I was recovering from donating a kidney, and that was done secretly. I did it. My family knew, and my chief of staff knew. I have colleagues who have children that were born premature, or parents and grandparents that are living with them. All the things that you can think of that when you put somebody at risk that might be the case, but pretending that because you didn't know it for sure, it was okay. Somehow just didn't get it done, and it worked. About a week and a half later, maybe 2 weeks later, the most powerful Republican in Pennsylvania government, the Speaker of the Pennsylvania House, resigned. And we've got a new Speaker of the House now, but he's hopefully someone that we can work with. And yeah, it was a big moment, certainly in my last 8 years.
I mean, I obviously I knew about what had happened. I did not know until I looked, I think yesterday, that the speaker had resigned, which is great. And so good on you for leading that fight and making that happen. I mean, it's just it's kind of incomprehensible when you think about it that they would do something like that. But like you said, this is where the Republican Party is at now, both on the state and federal level. But no, and out of curiosity, what is the makeup of the state legislature? I mean, I know it's Republican control, but is it by like a huge margin, or is it?
Yes, it is. So Pennsylvania is the greatest gerrymandered state, sort of the last great gerrymandered state in the United States. Virginia was, and Virginia fixed its gerrymander and is now classically Democratic as its population is, but we're not. There are just about 1 million more registered Democrats in Pennsylvania than Republicans, and Republicans have controlled the House during my time here by the widest margins in a generation.
Wow.
Right now they have a 20-something seat lead, and that's almost insurmountable, except that there are so many more Democrats in the state that we're actually about to overcome the gerrymander. Mm-hmm. And then we'll be able to just get rid of gerrymandering altogether, change how it's done, make sure that we as elected officials aren't picking our constituents, that it's the other way around. But it does mean that we're Republican controlled. And what the data tells us is something that I actually see play out every day. When you gerrymander a legislature, rather than try to govern slightly from the middle or to try to soften your edges and adopt what you know to be the majority's views, what those parties do is they do the opposite. And they go hard line on all their issues. And in my case, we've seen 21-week abortion bans. We've seen a ban on trans kids from having public health care. Some really wicked things. And that's what Republicans here think they should be doing, even though the state itself is far more Democratic than the state legislature is.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I was actually going to ask you this towards the end, but since we're sort of on the subject of where Pennsylvania is politically, are you confident, or do you think Biden will win Pennsylvania, or how do you feel about it?
Oh, those are three very different questions. Am I confident? Do I think Biden will win, and how do I feel? I am not confident. Nobody should be. Both because of what we know and what we can't know. What we know is that election interference has played a major role in Pennsylvania and across the country before. What we know is that despite having a 1.2 million Democratic vote advantage in 2016, that Trump won the state by 44,000 votes. And that mathematically has never made a lot of sense, but it was the case. The makeup of the state is different now. There's less of a margin, although there are still many more Democrats. There are not the Republican powers that be in this state anymore. So that makes me feel better. Mm-hmm. I do believe that Biden is going to win. All the indices that I see, both in terms of Trump support and Biden support and sort of non-voter support, teaches me or tells me right now that Biden is doing the right things and that Trump is doing the wrong things, and that combination is what it's going to take to win. How do I feel? I feel nervous as hell. My degree is in international comparative human rights law, international comparative law. And one of the things that I know about democracies, about international relationships, about the lifespan of nations is that, while we celebrate being the longest successful democracy in world history with the longest peaceful transfers of power in world history, all of those things are subject to the time and the pressure and the both the good and the evil of history, of money, of influence. And we're at a point right now where we are either going to right this ship, and by that I don't just mean we as Democrats wanting to win the election. I mean that what we do in the years that follow, we have to strengthen laws and make sure that things that were once norms are now standards and laws, because the norms fell apart. We always thought that if a president openly violated the Hatch Act and made money, that we would prosecute them. Well, we didn't realize that the Senate was controlled by the same party, that such things wouldn't happen. Like, that's not how those things were envisioned. We never envisioned that a president would appoint family members to positions otherwise held by trusted government employees or people that were duly elected or approved by the Senate. And so because those were norms, they weren't laws. Well, they need to be laws going forward. The laws about whether or not members of the finance committee can get information about such things as a pending pandemic and benefit from it in the sale of stock and the purchase of stock and not somehow go to jail. We never envisioned that the party in control would feel like they could avoid prosecuting in such an obtuse way. And so we're going to fix those things. The other thing that makes me feel good is this. The answer to broken democracy is representation. It sounds kind of trite, but it turns out it's actually true. In the states that have the greatest representation of women, of people of color, of first and second generation immigrants, of LGBTQ people, what we see is more functioning democracies. Essentially, democracies that look more like the people they represent, behave more in ways that benefit all the people that they represent. And that's a good thing. And we're seeing that now more than ever. This is going to be the time period that launched sort of American engagement, American democracy 2.0. When finally our government will look more like us. And so, in this last cycle, more women ran for office than at any time in U.S. history. More queer people ran for office than at any time in U.S. history. More people of color, more second-generation immigrants. Like, we're doing the right things already, so that in 15 years, we are talking about the revolution that this spurned, not how it was the beginning of the end.
100%. And I think it's so fascinating that, Pennsylvania, which was for so long sort of considered like a safe blue state, is now seems like it's sort of in so many ways sort of the center focus of this whole fight. I was watching listening to David Plouffe on Pod Save America yesterday, and he was saying, how all these polls showing that Pennsylvania, Biden's up by 8 or 9 points. He was like, he thinks that Biden's ceiling is 4 or 5 points in Pennsylvania, and that it's going to come down to, a fairly close margin. And then, not that I need to tell you, but of course, there's not only the vote itself, but the mail-in ballot situation, the legal fights, the talk, which I know you posted about, they may try to usurp the process with electors. I mean, what do you think? There's any validity or viability to that strategy?
Yes, and yes. It's the thing that keeps me up at night the most. So, yeah, I think that the Pennsylvania popular vote is going to go for Biden. Keep in mind, Biden has always been called Pennsylvania's third senator. He is beloved in this state and always has been. That doesn't mean that there aren't plenty of Trump supporters in the state, as evidenced by 2016. But Pennsylvania's conservatives are a unique bunch in that they are, not all of them are religious conservatives. Some of them are fiscal conservatives. Some of them are actual classic old school conservatives that believed in an education, but also believed in applying conservative values, small government, those kinds of things. Those kinds of conservatives are angry right now. They don't see themselves reflected in government. They don't see a fiscal responsibility. They don't see responsibility on the international stage. They don't see responsibility with respect to understanding that the markets will fluctuate based on what they see out of leadership from the White House. And so there are a lot of types of Republicans that are finding it within them frustration right now. Now, they do one of two things. Republicans, when they're mad at the party, either don't vote or they just vote down ticket. They don't vote Democrat. And I don't see a lot of them voting for Joe Biden. I just see simply a lot of them not voting. Mm-hmm. Democrats actually do that same thing. We even do it more. More Democrats won't vote if they're not happy with the Democratic ticket. And I think one of the things that we need to see out of Joe Biden tonight is his understanding that he's not trying to capture this non-existent middle that is undecided. He's trying to make sure that all the Democrats that are out there, the kinds that voted for Obama by 12, 13 million more votes, mm-hmm. see in him that kind of leadership. And I think we will. This issue about them stealing the vote, though, is very real. One of the things that we learned from Bush v. Gore in Florida is that most people don't know this, but the Second Amendment of the Constitution, or Article 2 of the Constitution, says that the states shall decide the electors. Mm-hmm. And states have always put that up to a popular vote. Most people understand that sort of election law is really decided by states in and of themselves, but they never realize that every single state that we have decides those electors based on the popular vote, but they're not required to. And in that Bush v. Gore case, the Supreme Court said that states could take back that power. And so what the argument is to take states like Pennsylvania, where there is Republican leadership in the legislature, but a largely Democratic state, which will probably vote for Biden, and challenge the results in our states so that they can't be certified in time. In our case, by about mid-December, when they really would have to be certified. Already we know that President Trump is most likely to say he's won on election night, no matter what the count is, knowing that we'll be waiting weeks. Already he's likely to sue in certain states to try to hold up certification of those votes. But in Pennsylvania and states like us, he's likely to try to hold up the certification of the popular vote, if it's for Biden, long enough that the Republican legislature will step in on the deadline and say, there's ambiguity, therefore we're putting up our slate of electors, and we believe that Trump has won, therefore assigning our electorate votes to him. Now, if that happens, there's a couple of steps that have to happen. It'll have to go once through our legislature. I serve on the committee. It will have to go through. I serve on the floor where it will have to go as well. And I can tell you all eyes will be on the Commonwealth. We are a gerrymandered state. It's not that we have a natural Republican leadership in the House and we might go for Biden in the popular vote. It would be a colossal constitutional crisis, but it's one that we're this is the state that wrote the rules of the Constitution. I think we're getting as prepared for this as anybody can be.
I mean, that's for me. I've said from the get-go that I was less concerned. I mean, of course, I'm concerned about Biden winning the election, but more than that, I'm concerned about what's going to happen after November 3rd. And as you said, the constitutional crisis. I mean, I think there's a good chance that we're going to have more civil unrest, on a way bigger level than what we saw even in June. So that's been my biggest concern. But no, I think, I saw that a lot of people were saying in the news, the amount of steps it would take for them to actually do that. The legislature would have to pass the bill. They'd have to overrule or override the governor's veto. Are there the kind of numbers where they could do that if they really wanted to?
Not likely, but not impossibly. And I can't stress that enough. My legislature is sort of based on possibility, not likelihood. And it's one of the things that, this is a Hail Mary, no question about it. But part of the reason Hail Marys exist is because they're utilized. When you're going down, when you are the bellwether, when you're the last resort, you pull out all the stops. And this is one of those stops that is far from being theoretical.
Right. Now, they'll probably go to any length necessary to hold on to power. But I wanted to go back a little bit because, obviously I know a lot about you anyway, but I did a little research and I didn't know that you were from a military family and that your parents were both Army lieutenant colonels.
Yep.
Is that right?
I'm 42 like a week and a half ago, and my mom could still beat the hell out of me.
Amazing.
You probably know a thing or two about that.
I do.
Right?
I definitely do.
Are fascinating. They both grew up in military households as well. My mom's family were doctors and surgeons. My dad's family were engineers and officers. My dad was drafted and my mom enlisted when the Vietnam War broke out. And that's when they met during Vietnam and stayed active duty their entire lives. My older brother was born in Germany. My twin brother and I were born in Washington, D.C. And my kid sister was born at the military academy at West Point.
I'm sure you had thoughts then. I mean, we all did, but I'm sure you in particular had thoughts about what Trump said about military families and military members.
Sure.
I mean, I have members of my family who have been in the military, but not my parents. And so I'm sure that was something that affected you in particular.
Yes, but yes and no. And listen, I like a lot of queer people and a lot of marginalized people. I think we're getting better at being gatekeepers of our own frustrations. What gets in, what doesn't. We can acknowledge intellectually that something should be troubling, that something is wrong emotionally, intellectually, without having to absorb it. And so I was annoyed as hell by it. It's a wrong thing to say. It's terrible. It's heinous. But this is somebody that also said he didn't like John McCain because they think he was a hero because he was captured. And so it's completely on brand. And so if it's going to be on brand, I got to not be so or so emotionally vested that it troubles me. I also, I know that in the 150 some odd year history of his family, that there's not a single amount of military service.
Wow.
And that other than, from what I understand, Nazi serving a Nazi government before coming to the United States. And so, I that's just history. And so, calling military people losers and suckers. What do you expect from somebody who has put $1,500 in total towards that military in the last 18 years? That's what you get. You get what you pay for. And when you are cheap to begin with, so are the things that come out of your words. What do they say? When you play stupid games, you win stupid prizes.
That's a good way of putting it. Yeah, and I mean that was the thing I didn't understand about some of the people I had or heard from who said, who are the sources? I'm like, it's not as if this is a hugely shocking thing. Like he said virtually the same thing about McCain and other people in public. Yeah. So it's like, people are like, oh, it's not true. There are no sources. I'm like, he said basically the same thing in public. So I don't know.
When it was said earlier, it didn't impact you. And I think that's the thing, right? I count on Trump supporters to expect us to try to intellectualize all of the shit that's coming out of his mouth and their mouths. They know that we are befuddled. How can he say this and do this? How can you believe that but still do this thing? They know that we are going to intellectualize that we're trying to solve that problem in order to re-engage with them to change their mind. And all the time they're just thinking, I get to believe what I believe while you're spinning your wheels trying to figure out why I do it. And I think that's one of the things that we need to get a little bit away from. Every now and again, when I first started doing this, people would ask me all the time, how do I talk to my gay neighbor or my neighbor who hates gay people? Or how do I talk to my coach who doesn't think that lesbians should be on the team or whatever it may be? Mm-hmm. And I used to have a lot of solutions for that, and a lot of answers for that, especially doing the policy work that I do. I'm trying to change minds. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But what I've learned is that we are now the majority. We may all behave like islands, but we are a massive continent. And the truth of the matter is we don't need to sway other people anymore. We don't need to change minds anymore. We need to get the people that are already on our team to say they're on our team. We need to get people that say they support us to rank that support in the top 10 issues they care about. But we're way, way, way beyond a time historically in our sort of civil rights battle where we need to give time and attention to our opponents. Especially if it's just us spinning our wheels because they're laughing their way to leadership and control. But we don't need to do that. Mathematically, we just don't need to change hearts and minds anymore. Mm-hmm. We need to take the hearts and minds that are already with us and we need to make them active.
Yep, absolutely. And so you grew up in a lot of different places, but then you moved to Pennsylvania in your teenage years. Yep. And I knew about the fact that you were first in a lot of different areas. The fact that you were the first openly gay college football captain in NCAA history. Especially at that time in 2000? What was that like? Was that like a conscious choice that you made, or how did that whole thing even come about?
It was not a conscious choice I made. It was actually quite the opposite. I had the benefit of being around really, really great teammates throughout my entire high school and college football experience. My parents retired. They were both at the Pentagon. They retired in the mid-90s and moved to southeastern Pennsylvania. My dad worked for Lockheed Martin while they were developing the F-18, and my mom is a nurse.
Wow.
And I went to one of those schools where all the athletes also got good grades, but they also won state championships. And I started playing football along with my twin brother, and my football team just got better and better and better. We went to a state championship my senior year of high school, and I got recruited to play football at one of the state schools. I'm actually in the house right now. I'm in Harrisburg. We're in session. I'm in our capital. And I stay with one of my best friends who's a teammate of mine from when I was in college. And so I went to college and I was there for 4 years, went to a national championship, which I lost. And right afterward, I was at my twin brother's college. I was at Shippensburg University, and I was visiting for something called Jello wrestling, which I'm sure is illegal as hell. I'm a lawyer and I should know. And what they do is at the end of every semester, or end of every academic year, they would take 400 gallons of red Jello, and they would build like a makeshift wrestling ring in the middle of the quad on campus, like out of like bales of hay and tarps. And groups could sign up to wrestle each other, like, the mathletes versus the chess club kind of a thing. And so my twin brother let me know this was happening. I signed up to wrestle their cheerleading squad. His football team had beat mine that year, and it just seemed like sweet retribution. I don't know what I was thinking. And I drove there, about a 3-hour drive with 3 people, 2 of whom were on my football team, my quarterback, my best friend at the time, who was a defensive end, and then one of the guys that we lived with who was not a football player. And right after I won the wrestling match, and they should have known I was gay when I won, I was walking back to my car to get more beer, I think, and my quarterback stopped me. And I'd known him for 4 years. I had just lost a national championship with him. He turned me around in the woods and he said, "Yo, Sims, are you gay?" And he just asked me. And I'd always thought I'd have a really cool answer. After all these years, I don't know. I don't know what I was thinking. And I said, "Yeah, man, thanks for asking. Like, jeepers, am I really fucking gay?" And he said, "Well, thanks for being honest with me." He goes, "I got a ton of questions." And we jumped in the car to drive back to my college, and the 3 of them peppered me with questions the entire drive home. And it was great. And I'd never come out to anybody before. And we pulled into town and they asked me the question I knew was coming is, "Can we tell the team?" And I looked at my quarterback, and like a third of the guy's wardrobe was hunting orange or camouflage, right? And I was like, well, shit, if this guy can handle this, maybe the rest of my team can. And so I said, yeah. And what followed was the best 4 months of my life. My teammates, they called a giant meeting. They told everybody. They said, if you got a problem with it, you got to walk, because this is how, this is our teammate.
Wow.
And for months, one by one, 120 guys on my college football team found a private time to pull me aside, to apologize to me for dumb shit they might have said, to ask if I was going to hit on them, which I was never going to do. And frankly, just to make right and make sure that I still, loved and respected them, and let me know that they loved and respected me. And so,
wow.
Yeah, I got to come out to a college football team.
That's quite a story. I can't believe I didn't know that story. I mean, I read about your story, when you were on the team and everything. I didn't know that part of it, though. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, Jello wrestling brought us all together.
I imagine that the decision obviously you were already out, so it's not like you were coming out when you decided to run for office, but was, being sort of, you became the first openly gay state legislator, but was in Pennsylvania, but was that something that you were concerned about, or was it kind of a thing of like,
no, it was very intentional. Yeah, it actually was very intentional. And I talk about this a lot because I spend so much time trying to find and fund and recruit other out people to run for office. Mm-hmm. Running for office was not the fulfillment of a lifelong dream for me at all. My lifelong dream was to be a civil rights attorney. I took my entrance exams to law school when I was 16 years old. And I was doing that work, but I was doing it in a state that had no LGBTQ civil rights. And it turned out that for years we've known that no state that ever really passed any comprehensive queer civil rights did it without first having an out legislator. And so for years I tried to elect an out legislator. There were 2 different races, twice both the candidates lost, and I was feeling really defeated. And at some point—
Was this through Equality Pennsylvania?
It was. I used to run Equality Pennsylvania, and I was doing that below. I'm a civil rights attorney by trade, but I was running Equality PA, and I was serving on the board of the Victory Fund. Mm-hmm. And we were trying desperately to get somebody into our legislature because the lobbying wasn't working, and they lost. And my friend sat me down and said, "You're the person you're looking for." And I didn't believe it. It took me another year. It took David Mixner. David called me up to his cabin. I didn't know him well. And he was dying at the time of a pretty rare form of a couple of types of cancer. And brought me up to a cabin and spent 3 days smoking pot, wrapped in fur, talking about the world. And he told me I should run for office. And I went back, I had the conversation again with my friends, and then I did it.
What's funny is, I mean, not to over flatter you, but I mean, it's true. It's like you are so obviously the perfect person. I mean, you're charismatic, you're incredibly smart, you're good looking, you've got it all. You've got
I'm like, oh, stop.
yeah, it's true. I mean, you're literally like, I was thinking, and not to divert too much, but you should run for. I think you should run for U.S. Senate against Pat Toomey in 2022. Like, you are shoo-in guaranteed. Like, you've got everything that a candidate should have. So,
well, thank you for that. I'll tell you, it's not, it's not always been the case, and it's not even true now. Thank you. While I'm very proud to have been the first out person elected in Pennsylvania, the uniquest.
And only the second, right now, you said. You're one of two still, right?
Yeah, last term, my colleague Malcolm Kenyatta from North Philly.
Right, yeah, of course.
And so now there's two of us.
Wow.
Yeah, I for the longest time knew that as the only sort of out voice doing this, that there would be a lot of attention, that there would come with it a lot of scrutiny. But I, like a lot of people, I'm here because I believe deeply in the mission of equality, not because I believe deeply in me as an elected official. And easily a third of my colleagues serve because of anger, frustration, or expertise. The rest of them, we know those types of people. They're the people that have just always thought they belonged in the front of the room, that wait until everyone's done talking and then think they're summarizing the room, those kinds of things. Those kinds of people have found their way into politics for all time, but now the rest of us are as well. And they're who we're squeezing out. And the more and more and more of them that we do, the better and better and better that government seems to behave.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Totally. Well, I could go on talking to you for hours, but I'm so grateful for you taking the time. I'll let you get ready, prepare for the debate, but I'm so grateful, and I hope I get to see you in person one day soon. And please run for U.S. Senate or whatever you run for. I'll be there for you. I'll move out to Philadelphia for 6 months and work on your campaign. So
come live in the neighborhood while I'm running for dog catcher.
Well, I actually I spent time there because I worked on in Philly because I worked on an gay independent film when I was 17. I had a one and only small acting role that I had.
So that was 2 years ago?
I'm getting older. I'm definitely getting older, but yeah, I mean, that was 10 years ago, but I love that place so much. And
it's keen for another visit. I hope I'm out near you before you're out here, but regardless, I think for all of us, it's going to be the late spring or the early summer of next year. And until then, I'm just glad that you're safe. I'm glad that the people around you seem to be very safe and healthy. Big stuff going on tonight for sure, but not definitive of what's going to happen over the next 30 some odd days. And I maybe in a month or two we can come back on and either talk about how we were wrong and it was clean and clear and we passed power along peacefully, or we can talk about what to do next.
Oh yeah, that sounds good to me. I'm gonna break open a bottle of wine myself now and start drinking.
Yep.
So I'm sufficiently tipsy for when this thing begins. So
take a sip every time you hear the word tax.
Or China, or you.
Yeah, or China.
All right, Brian.
Oh, it's good to catch up with you. Hopefully I'll talk to you real soon.
Sounds good. Have a good night. Bye. Bye. Bye, everybody. Thanks.